My name is Lily, and I am 49 years old. I have been working as an office clerk at a nearby factory for many years. Until just recently, I lived with my husband Toby, my mother-in-law Kim, and our only daughter Ellie at my in-laws' house. My married life lasted for 28 years, which I think is quite a long time. However, just recently, I put an end to that married life. Yes, I got divorced. It's what they call a late-life divorce. Some people around me were surprised, while others said it couldn't be helped. My married life began when I was 20 years old and had an arranged meeting with my husband. At that time, I had graduated from a local commercial high school and was working as a clerical assistant at the factory where I still work today. It was my father's friend who brought up the idea of the arranged meeting with my husband-to-be.
We have a son around your age in our family. Would you like to meet him? He works as a civil servant at the city hall.
My mother supported the idea, saying,
A civil servant for a husband? That's a great opportunity for you. Please consider it.
My then-husband gave off the impression of being serious and somewhat nervous.
Nice to meet you. I'm Toby.
During our first encounter, he seemed quite tense and didn't initiate much conversation. What kind of work do you do at the city hall? And what are your hobbies? He responded to my questions politely.
I work in the Citizen Services Division at the City Hall, mainly handling tasks like issuing resident certificates and working at the service counter. My hobby is fishing, and I often go to the river with my friends on weekends.
It felt like I had become an interviewer. However, I thought that with someone as earnest as him, I could build a reassuring home. After the arranged meeting, it was my husband who proposed to start dating. During our courtship, he remained as serious and quiet as ever. However, gradually he began to talk a bit about his hobby of fishing, and I thought maybe he was slowly opening up to me. About a year after the arranged meeting, we got married. Since he was an only child, I moved into my in-laws' house right after the wedding. At the arranged meeting, my mother-in-law remained silent, showing little interest and simply observing quietly, seemingly overshadowed by my father's friend. And because we hardly had any chances to meet during our courtship, I didn't know much about her. I assumed she might be as earnest as my husband. But that was a big mistake. My mother-in-law turned out to be a person full of problems. On the day I moved into my in-laws' house, my mother-in-law confronted me directly.
Now that you're married into this family, you must serve both me, your mother-in-law, and your husband, Toby, diligently. Backtalk will not be tolerated,
she said. I was taken aback by her sudden arrogance, but I replied in confusion. I may be inexperienced, but please treat me kindly. And then, from the next morning, my life changed completely. I was awakened at 4 a.m. to clean the house, prepare breakfast, and make my husband's lunch. Of course, I wasn't allowed to sit and eat breakfast. My mother-in-law said,
A daughter-in-law should eat standing up in the kitchen.
So, I stood in a corner of the kitchen and ate my breakfast. Naturally, I was responsible for all the cleaning up as well. What surprised me was that my mother-in-law was helping my husband with his morning preparations entirely. She would wake him up, bring a basin of water to his bedside, and say,
Wash your face with this and wake up.
Furthermore, she would also choose and dress him in his outfit for the day. Watching my husband, dressed in the clothes she had picked out, my mother-in-law would smile with satisfaction, and my husband had a look on his face as if to say it was only natural. In addition, when I saw my husband being helped into his shoes before leaving for work, I was left speechless. I couldn't help but wonder if it was necessary for her to go that far. However, my mother-in-law, with hostility plain to see, said,
I'll take care of my child. So stay away.
My husband seemed to think it was only natural for his mother to take care of him. He didn't utter a word of thanks to his mother, making me wonder if he had no gratitude towards his own mother. But more than that, my mother-in-law's actions were shocking, and I realized that the future ahead would not be bright. Besides, my husband showed little interest in me. While his busy job played a role, he prioritized his hobbies on weekends. Let's go shopping together sometime, I would suggest, but he would respond,
I'd rather go fishing, so go by yourself.
Even when I persisted, saying, I want to go with you, he would coldly brush me off, saying,
There's no need for that.
The only occasions he would accompany me were those where it would be awkward if we didn't attend together, such as family gatherings or weddings and funerals of relatives or friends. I asked him, Why did you marry me?
Relatives around me were saying you're getting to that age where you should get married. But I didn't want to bother finding a partner myself, and a marriage proposal came along, so I married you.
He said such things outright. What's that supposed to mean? You didn't like me?
Not particularly. I neither like nor dislike you.
Those words shattered me, and I broke down in tears. I was devastated by my husband's words. My hardships continued further. While my mother-in-law treated my husband with great care, she was extremely harsh towards me.
You're such a useless wife. No matter what you do.
It became her constant refrain. Once, when I came home late due to overtime and quickly made dinner using curry mix, my mother-in-law said,
I won't let my child eat such lazy cooking.
And threw it away in the trash. There wasn't a day without complaints about the taste of the dishes being too strong or too weak. Even my husband's lunchbox was only allowed to contain the side dishes made that day. All the prepared side dishes for storage were thrown away. My mother-in-law found fault with every aspect of cleaning and laundry as well. She ordered me to polish the entrance floor every day, and just after I had finished, she would stomp on it with her dirty muddy shoes, saying,
It's still dirty.
When I did the laundry, she would complain,
The scent of this fabric softener is distasteful. Wash it again because it smells bad.
And she made me redo the laundry that I had just hung up. That alone would have been bearable since it stayed within our home. However, my mother-in-law had a bad habit. It was compulsive lying. She would spread lies about me to neighbors and relatives. Lies like I was neglecting household chores, mistreating my husband, or bullying my mother-in-law every day. She would tell these lies as if they were true, sometimes shedding tears, saying,
My daughter-in-law.
So everyone believed them wholeheartedly.
You should be more respectful to your mother-in-law.
She's the one who raised your husband, after all.
How many times did I hear such things from neighbors and relatives? As I was contemplating divorce, I found out I was pregnant. I thought that once the child was born, my husband would change. Even if he didn't care about me, he would surely dote on his own child. And perhaps, through the grandchild, my relationship with my mother-in-law could improve. At that time, that's what I hoped for, but it turned out to be a huge mistake. They had both hoped for a boy. During childbirth, they were present at the hospital. But when they heard the gender of the newborn, they quickly left without even looking at the child's face.
What? A girl.
I still remember my husband's words as if it were yesterday.
A girl.
My mother-in-law also sighed with a disappointed expression on her face. I named our daughter Ellie, a name I had chosen. They had only considered names for boys. It seemed that my husband dreamed of going fishing with a son, and my mother-in-law wanted a grandson who resembled my husband. Therefore, neither my husband nor my mother-in-law paid any attention to my daughter. But at that time, I believed that as they spent time together, affection would grow, and they would come to cherish her. My husband did contribute to our daughter's education expenses and attended necessary events as a father. However, it was merely fulfilling the obligation of this is what parents should do due to societal expectations. While there was no abuse, there was a significant lack of emotional connection between parent and child. My mother-in-law was the same, and as our daughter grew, she also distanced herself from my husband and mother-in-law. I've thought about divorce many times, but despite being such a husband, he does fulfill the minimum duties as a father. Perhaps having a father around might be better for handling unforeseen circumstances in the future, something I, as a mother, might not be able to handle alone. Plus, he earns more than I do. Thinking about the future expenses for our daughter, I couldn't easily go through with a divorce. When my daughter reached high school age, she seemed to sense my situation.
It's okay to divorce, Dad. I'll get a part-time job,
she said. But even if I wanted to divorce and return to my parents' home, they had already passed away, and I only had my brother and his wife, so I would just be a burden if I went back. I struggled every day, juggling household chores, work, and taking care of my daughter. However, the event that finally put an end to that life happened when my daughter became an adult and started working. It all started with my mother-in-law's hospitalization. On a bitterly cold winter day, she went out for her usual early morning walk and slipped on the frozen road, falling down. Unable to move, she was found by a newspaper delivery person who called for emergency assistance. Both my husband and I took urgent leave from work and rushed to the hospital. However, when the doctor informed us,
Given her age, her bones and muscle strength are weakened. Even if she recovers, it's uncertain whether she'll regain full mobility.
my husband, indifferent, simply responded with,
"Oh, I see.
and then he said,
Please discuss the rest with my wife."
I was left to handle everything. My husband didn't even visit my mother-in-law at the hospital. On weekends, he continued to indulge in his hobby of fishing as usual. Every day after work, I would stop by her hospital room, bringing her laundry and taking care of her needs. However, my mother-in-law complained to the attending nurses.
My daughter-in-law is really thoughtless and unhelpful. It's troubling.
The nurses tried to reassure her.
Having someone visit every day is wonderful. You have a good daughter-in-law.
But my mother-in-law continued with her complaints.
That woman only puts on a good face in front of others. She always bullied me. It was really tough.
And she continued to spread lies. To make matters worse, she blamed me for my husband not coming to visit her. My mother-in-law berated me, saying,
It's because you're filling his head with nonsense that my son isn't coming. You're truly a terrible daughter-in-law.
Unable to admit that he was off fishing while neglecting his mother, I could only try to cover it up by saying, "He's very busy." As the doctor predicted, my mother-in-law's broken bones were taking a long time to heal. With a severe flu epidemic spreading in the community, signs of the outbreak were beginning to show even within the hospital. Amidst this situation, my mother-in-law contracted the flu, causing a high fever. Even in such circumstances, my husband remained indifferent. How can you go fishing when your own mother is in danger? Show some concern for your mother. I admonished him. But my husband replied,
I told you to handle it.
And continued going fishing. I couldn't help but deeply despise him for his heartlessness, despite how well my mother-in-law had treated him. And then, an incident occurred that made me completely fed up with my husband. On a weekend morning, as my husband was once again preparing to go fishing, I caught him at the front door and said firmly, "Today, you're absolutely going to visit your mother. After all the care she has shown you, the least you can do is pay her a visit." But my husband looked truly disgusted and replied,
That was her own choice. I never asked her to do anything for me.
I was speechless at his words. I couldn't believe it. Ignoring my stunned silence, my husband continued,
My fishing buddies are waiting for me. I won't be back until the day after tomorrow.
And walked out the door. Watching him leave, my daughter muttered with genuine disgust.
Dad, that's just too much.
That night, I received a call from the hospital informing me that my mother-in-law's condition had deteriorated critically. I rushed to the hospital immediately. By the time I arrived, my mother-in-law had already been transferred to the intensive care unit and was wearing an oxygen mask. It seemed she had developed pneumonia as well. The doctor said,
Tonight may be critical.
Naturally, I tried contacting my husband right away, but he ignored my messages on WhatsApp, didn't pick up my calls, and didn't respond to my emails. I felt deeply disgusted with my husband and questioned why I should continue running around for my mother-in-law, who had treated me so poorly. Why should I be the one to be by her side in her final moments? Shouldn't that be the duty of her own son, my husband? After all, I hadn't received any kindness from my mother-in-law. Despite his mother being critically ill, my husband prioritizes his own leisure activities. Why should I exhaust myself for people like them? I've had enough. Those thoughts crossed my mind. Well then, I'll excuse myself.
What?
I left the office, leaving behind a bewildered doctor. It's better for my husband to be here than me, so I'll go home. With that, I quickly left the hospital. When I arrived home, my daughter, with a worried look on her face, was waiting for me.
How did it go?
She asked. Tonight might be critical, but I didn't want to take care of that person, so I came back. Hearing this, my daughter responded,
I understand. So, what are you going to do now?
I'm going to divorce your father. You're grown up now.
That sounds good. If you divorce, I'll live on my own. I've been worried about you all this time.
I see. Thank you. The next day, we left my in-law's house early in the morning. Though it might have been a bit uncomfortable, we decided to go back to our parents' house. When we explained the situation to my brother and his wife, they scolded us, asking why we hadn't told them earlier. A while later, my husband bombarded my phone with calls and WhatsApp messages, but I ignored them and contacted him a few days later.
What the hell are you doing?
Who knows?
My mom's critically ill, and you just left, didn't you? Because of that, I had to rush back from my trip.
Well, yeah. She's your mother, so it's only natural for you to take care of her.
I told you to take care of her.
I never said I would do it. Besides, considering how much she took care of you, wouldn't it be appropriate for you to repay that kindness a bit? With a rather harsh tone, I silenced my husband, but I pressed on. So, How is your mother?
She's stabilized, but she's lost a lot of strength, and they say it's going to be difficult for her to move around like before.
So, are you considering moving her to a care facility?
That costs a lot of money. It's your job to take care of her.
I don't care.
Huh?
My single response seemed to puzzle my husband. I said I don't care. I don't want to be married to someone who is indifferent when others are in trouble. And I have no intention of taking care of a deceitful mother-in-law like yours.
So, are you saying you want a divorce?
That's right. I'm divorcing you. Ellie agrees with me.
Is she really going to abandon her grandmother and father?
Huh? You two have been indifferent to Ellie all this time. You've hardly been involved with her, and now you're talking about abandonment? Don't be ridiculous. Toby fell silent again, but soon he spoke up.
But you're just a clerk at a small-town factory, right? Won't you struggle financially if we divorce?
This time, he mocked my profession and used financial matters as a shield. Oh, don't worry about that. I earn just as much as you do.
That's a lie, isn't it?
It's not a lie. How long do you think I've been working at that company? I'm already in a managerial position, and I'm going to be promoted to an executive role soon. So, I won't have any financial problems, especially now that Ellie is an adult. I worked at that factory ever since I graduated, juggling household chores and childcare. There were many times when I wanted to quit due to the physical strain, but I couldn't afford to lose my job as it would mean losing income, and I had to consider the worst-case scenario. So, I worked desperately. After over a decade, the company grew from a small local factory to one of the largest in the region, and I found myself promoted to a managerial position. Eventually, I even reached the position of a board member. It's no wonder that my indifferent husband didn't know about it. His only concern was fishing. I've already decided to divorce you, so from now on, let's communicate through lawyers.
Wait a minute, aren't we a married couple? Let's talk it over.
I'm not waiting. After this incident, I've come to realize that you're a selfish person who only thinks about yourself. So, goodbye. I cut off the call despite Toby's attempts to stop me. Afterwards, I proceeded with the divorce through my lawyer. My husband objected to the divorce, saying,
Divorce would tarnish my reputation. Besides, my mother needs care.
However, since I insisted firmly on getting divorced, he reluctantly signed the divorce papers. Of course, I received adequate compensation and asset distribution. It seems that my ex-husband is ultimately taking care of my former mother-in-law at home. He apparently wanted to place her in a care facility, but she refused and insisted on being cared for by her son at home. However, given his previous indifference towards others, he is unlikely to be capable of the meticulous care required for caregiving, and my former mother-in-law is reportedly being treated roughly by him, leading to a deterioration in their relationship. I heard that there is constant tension and battles between them every day. Just the other day, as I passed by their house, I heard them arguing loudly, and when I asked the neighbors what was going on, they chuckled and said that today was still relatively calm, as they often have intense fights until late at night. My daughter Ellie has started living on her own, and I have also rented an apartment near my workplace. Since pets are allowed in that apartment, I recently started keeping a turtle. Watching the relaxed demeanor of the turtle, I feel like the hectic pace of my life has somehow slowed down. I want to start using my time for myself from now on. With that in mind, I am spending today energetically as well.